Well, good evening and welcome councillors, officers and any members of the public watching at home to this meeting of the Customer Focus Scrutiny Committee, which is being undertaken virtually in accordance with the enacted government regulations during the current coronavirus pandemic. Before we start the meeting, the usual reminder to members of the following etiquette and so on. Please ensure that you mute your microphones when not speaking. Please remain focused on the topic being discussed. Please try to avoid repeating points which have already been made. Please avoid interrupting other councillors and respect the position of the chair. Please remember that this meeting is still being broadcast in the normal way, live via Facebook. It is important, therefore, that members are aware that the public can hear what is being said and decided on, and that the public can see councillors as well. Please, therefore, take care to set your screen and cameras appropriately and prevent any background distractions. I'm Councillor Matt Vizard, the chair of the Scrutiny Committee, and we will make a start. Can I call on Sharon Sissons to do a roll call of all the councillors and officers to ascertain who is in this attendance? Sharon, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Vizard?
Present.
Just to state if you're present, thank you. Councillor Michael Mitchell?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Jane Begley? I don't believe she's here at the moment. Councillor Foggin?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Henson?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Kevin Mitchell?
Present.
Thank you. I have apologies from Councillor Oliver. Councillor Judy Patterson? I don't believe she's here at the moment. Councillor Alice Martin? You may have apologies. Councillor Ian Quantz? Councillor Keith Sparks?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Tony Wardle?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Warwick?
Present.
I'd now like to call for officers in attendance. Please could you also state you are present when I call your name. Director, City Development, Housing and Supporting People, Bindu Arjun.
Present.
Thank you. And I'm Sharon Sissons, and my colleague Howard Bassett from Democratic Services are present. I now confirm that we are quorate to proceed with the meeting, Chair. May I just also double check that we also have Councillor Diana Moore, who's asking a question.
We didn't hear that, Diana. I don't know. You did unmute, but it didn't seem.
Present. Can you hear me?
That's it.
We can, thank you very much. And we also, I can't see Councillor Jemima Moore who's asking a question, and we also have two portfolio holders, Councillor Wright. If you just confirm if you're present.
I'm present.
Thank you. And Councillor Ruth Williams.
Present.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, members. The first item on the agenda this evening is apologies. We have apologies I've already heard from Councillor Oliver. I believe we also have apologies from Councillor Alice Martin. Do we have any other apologies that anyone's aware of? Okay, we'll take that as no. Thank you. The next item of business is the minutes of the Customer Focus Scrutiny Committee held on the 16th of July 2020. Are members who were present at that meeting happy to approve these minutes as a correct record of the proceedings? A show of hands will be sufficient here, I think. And if members have any amendments or points of clarification, I will happily take these now. Just getting a show of hands. So don't think we have any points of amendments. Anyone not happy, speak now. Okay, we'll take those as read. Thank you very much indeed. I will sign the minutes in due course. Once things are back up and running, we can do that. The next item on the agenda is item 3, declarations of interest. If any members have any disclosable pecuniary interests that relate to business on the agenda which have not already been included in the register of interests, they are reminded to declare them before any discussion takes place on the relevant item. The next item of business is item 4. That's the Local Government Access to Information Act 1985 for the exclusion of press and public. There are no part 2 items on the agenda, so we should have no need to exclude the press or public this evening. And on to item 5. So this is questions from the public. I understand that no questions from the public have been received. Again, we do welcome these for future meetings, so we hope to get some in due course. Item 6 is next. The Scrutiny Programme Board met on the 30th of July this year to consider the way forward on scrutiny and agreed that portfolio holders would be invited to offer a report to each scrutiny committee on their respective issues and work as part of the focus on the recovery stage of the COVID pandemic. Members would continue to be given the opportunity to put forward questions to the portfolio holders. The list of questions received from members has been circulated to all council members as part of an update to the published agenda. For each portfolio, questions from members of this committee are listed first and then followed by questions from other council members. At this point, I'll just say on this occasion, a couple of questions were received from members of the committee, which were not on topics relating to the portfolio holders attending this meeting or to the area this scrutiny covers. We are therefore not taking these at this meeting, but have instead ensured that these questions are sent to the appropriate portfolio holder for response outside the meeting. The members concerned are, of course, free to share the responses they receive with other members. Following the recent change in portfolio holder roles, Councillor Ruth Williams as portfolio holder for Supporting People and Councillor Laura Wright as portfolio holder for Council Housing Developments and Services will present the respective briefing notes with Bindu Arjun, Director, to advise as necessary. I would be grateful to our portfolio holders if they could avoid repeating or highlighting information already contained in their reports, which members will have read. And so I now ask Councillor Williams as portfolio holder for Supporting People to briefly present the note portfolio, which members will have had the opportunity to read. Welcome, Ruth, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Let me say I'm absolutely delighted to have been offered and to accept this portfolio. I've taken over from Emma Morse, who's done a fantastic job, spent 4 years doing this portfolio, and Emma now has progressed to city development. She's a very hard act to follow, as you might imagine. It's only been a week since I started last Tuesday. So I want to thank Councillor Morse for all her dedication and determination in tackling the challenges, and it's been made even more difficult, obviously, with the COVID outbreak. Just to let you know what I've been doing this first week, I attended the virtual antisocial behaviour conference that was hosted and organised by the City Council. It's attracted a lot of local, regional leaders and partners, including the Bishop of Exeter, Chief Constable, John Hartley, leader of Devon County Council, Ben Bradshaw, many community partners, as well as having international contributors from cities in Portugal and the US. Exeter City Council did a fantastic job in putting this together, and we will be progressing the outcomes of that conference. I also attended the Exeter Community Safety Partnership yesterday, again with police, community partners, Devon County Council and Exeter City Council representatives. I want to thank Emma and the officers for preparing tonight's report. You might imagine you got it before I actually started in the job. I'd like to thank members for their questions. Obviously, having 9 questions rightly shows the considerable interest there is in this portfolio. And we assume that everyone has read the report. So without further ado, I suggest we go on to the questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams, much appreciated. And I'm sure, just picking up on your points, that we as a scrutiny committee will be returning to the issues of antisocial behaviour and the community safety partnership in due course at a future date. Questions from members of the committee are from Councillors Wardle, Foggin and Michael Mitchell, with questions from non-committee members, Councillors Jemima Moore and Diana Moore. Members are invited to read out their questions in the order set out in the list, and the portfolio holder and or the director will respond. The member who has put the question may ask a supplementary. Just a reminder to members that any supplementary must be based on the response given and not open up a new or different line of questioning. Committee members who wish to raise a point of clarification after the response of the portfolio holder or the director to each question and any supplementary question, please indicate by a raised hand or by Zoom notification, the blue hand, if you wish to speak. And this process we'll repeat for each question. So that leads us on to the first question, which is from Councillor Tony Wardle. Tony, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Question is, can the portfolio holder update us on the new test and trace support payments?
Thank you, Councillor Wardle, for this extremely timely question, giving me the opportunity to both update members and the community on what's happening. I have to, I'm not going to apologise for this, but there is a considerable amount of detail in the answer I'm going to give you, so I'm going to read it out so I don't leave out any important information. And because it's got some important information, what I have agreed with my team, Bindu Arjun, is that we're going to provide some Q&A type information for councillors to help them understand this particular scheme, if that's okay. Right. From 28th of September 2020, the government has changed the legislation so that certain people will have to self-isolate due to the current COVID-19 crisis. A package of legislative measures has been introduced both to ensure that those who are required to self-isolate do so, and that those on a low income receive a payment to assist their finances and to encourage compliance with the legislation. The Council is administering both the standard scheme and the discretionary scheme for Exeter. Both schemes are currently 2021. The standard scheme has been determined by criteria set down by government and is primarily aimed at all applicants who are working or self-employed and are unable to return to work from home, and will therefore have a reduction in income and are in receipt of certain qualifying benefits, such as universal credit, working tax credit, income-related employment and support allowance, income-based job seekers allowance, income support, housing benefit or pension credit. Government has confirmed that it will reimburse the Council for all payments correctly made under the standard scheme. The discretionary scheme, however, is intended for individuals who meet all the required criteria for the standard scheme, except that they are not currently in receipt of a qualifying benefit. The reason for this could be, for example, that a claim for benefit has not been made or is being appealed, or that the individual, whilst normally resident in the UK, is unable to gain access to public funds. The Council will be receiving £29,277 for the 4 months that the discretionary scheme is intended to last, and the Government has confirmed that no additional monies will be available to the Council. This funding equates to only 58 awards. Given that the funding for the discretionary scheme is limited, Government has stated that it will be up to each council to determine additional criteria that have to be met if a payment is to be made. The additional criteria has been developed with other authorities within the county and is designed to focus on those applicants who are not in receipt of qualifying benefit, are on a low income and have a relatively low capital, have had their income reduced and are therefore facing financial hardship due to self-isolation. Policies for both the standard scheme and the discretionary scheme have been submitted for approval, and will be available on the website, which is www.exeter.gov.uk/test-and-trace. And this will be available from the 12th of October. In fact, the website is available live now. The support will take the form of a single payment of £500. An individual may make an application more than once, but only if the individual is told to self-isolate multiple times and they meet the eligibility criteria for each individual application, and the periods of self-isolation do not overlap. Individuals in the same household can each make an application to receive a test and trace support payment if they each meet the criteria in full. Applicants must have been instructed by the NHS Test and Trace to stay at home and self-isolate, either because they've tested positive for COVID-19 or have recently been in close contact with someone who's tested positive. All applicants are required to provide an 8-digit unique ID number, which has been provided to them by the NHS the NHS Test and Trace system. Individuals meeting the eligibility criteria who've been instructed to self-isolate on or after the 28th of September are entitled to a payment, and government requested that local authorities have an application process in place by the 12th of October. Officers, along with Strata, have designed one online application form to cater for both schemes, which is currently being tested with a planned go live of the 12th of October. Online and telephone applications will be accepted. Eligible applications can be backdated to the 28th of September. In order to capture those backdated claims, the website has been live since the 28th of September, offering information and the capability to register an interest in claiming. Exeter has received 15 registrations of interest so far, and those residents will be emailed a link to the application form once it is live. Applications will be dealt with by benefit staff, as there is a need to check benefit eligibility through the DWP's searchlight system, which has restricted access. The benefit staff allocated to this task are working closely with their customer support colleagues, dealing with Exeter Wellbeing Support Hub, so that support can be provided if other vulnerability issues are identified. That's the end of my answer. Before I pass over to the chair, in case there are supplementaries, I do want to thank the Exeter City Council officers and their teams for working really, really hard in a very, very short period of time with colleagues from other district councils to put this system together. It's been very challenging and obviously has taken a large amount of effort. So congratulations to them and many thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. That's a very detailed and helpful answer, and I'm sure that the members of the committee will join me in also thanking the members of staff, and perhaps we could minute our thanks as we always do with this committee. Councillor Wardle, do you have a supplementary?
No, Chair, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Happy to take any points of clarification. Councillor Michael Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Could the portfolio holder clarify what the position is in regard to some elements of the self-employed people, because a large number have been left out by all the existing support systems if they've been short time in business or paid in strange ways, and I'm just wondering, does this also apply to this support system, or are they again left outside the circle of entitlement?
I think I'd need a bit more detail to be able to answer that, Councillor Mitchell. I'm just wondering if it might be appropriate for you to email in precisely what the issues are with the self-employed, and we can get you a specific answer.
Yes, more than happy to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sounds like a good way forward. Thank you. Any other questions or points of clarification? Councillor Henson.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to ask Councillor Williams Will we get that in writing, please, to us as each councillor? And the monies, are we reimbursed by the government levy? Will we be reimbursed by government, and by how much?
We are going to be reimbursed for the first scheme, Councillor Henson. That's the non-discretionary one. We've already been given the money for the discretionary scheme, and as I said, it was 58 awards, and that is it. We won't get any further monies for that. And clearly, we haven't been given monies for the time that officers have been spending putting all of this together. So we'll get reimbursement for the initial scheme, but and we've already had the monies for the discretionary scheme.
Where will the money be? I'm not asking you the figure now, but can you can the figure be emailed to me at some point from one of the departments, please? What you've already received from the government?
Yes. Do you want to? Oh, I can see Bindu Arjun.
Yes, you want to come in, Bindu? That might be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say that in the summary that we send around to all members describing the scheme will include the amount we've received.
Well, what I've got to, which is going to come.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Bindu. I
think that answers your questions, Councillor Henson. Thank you very much. Right, no other hands up, so we'll move on to the questions 2A and 2B. Now, we had two questions on a similar topic, so we've put them together, and I'll ask each of the councillors to read out their questions, and you will each get a chance to ask a supplementary. So question 2A is Councillor Fogg in Olwyn, please.
As you are providing accommodation for rough sleeping, what plans are there to remove tents and other items from in and around the high street?
Do you want me to follow on with question 2B?
Yes, please, Michael. Sorry.
Okay. In recent weeks, there appears to have been an increase in the number of individuals and groups rough sleeping in and around the city centre. What action are the council taking to ensure that these individuals are supported and helped as winter approaches?
Thank you, Councillor Foggin and Councillor Michael Mitchell. Again, I've got a very detailed answer here, which contains some very important information, which I believe all councillors would value, and also members of the public. So again, I'm going to read it out, and so you will have to bear with me because it is quite a long answer. The council coordinates responses to the city centre, and that includes the high street encampments, via contact and assessment by the outreach team working closely with the council's rough sleeper coordinator and the housing advice team. Rapid assessment for emergency accommodation or reconnection to home area is undertaken with a view to provide service offer as soon as possible. A number of services are simultaneously informed, including civil enforcement, city centre police and environmental health if antisocial behaviour is being committed. If a service offer is not available, for example, if there's no legal duty and no discretionary option, or it is declined, and if not already initiated, then enforcement action is taken, serving notice and removal of tents where necessary. Not all encampment dwellers are homeless, and in such cases, notifications are made to their housing providers to support interventions to ensure a swift return indoors. The council continues to provide accommodation for many rough sleepers through discretionary accommodation placements into temporary accommodation stock, as well as bed and breakfast spaces purchased from hotels willing to accommodate rough sleepers. Many hotels will not. The Great Western Hotel has the majority of occupants with recent rough sleeping experience, and all arising vacancies at the hotel are prioritised to rough sleepers nominated by the outreach team. In anticipation of the award of capital funds through the government's Next Steps accommodation programme, the plan is to resettle all current occupants of the hotel into move-on housing as and when vacancies and new spaces come online. The first spaces are expected at the repurposed 11-bed hostel at 62 Howell Road. A further 10-bed units are to be delivered by local partner, that's the Bournemouth and Chichester, I think it's Housing Association, and that's BCHA, under the first successful part of the Next Step accommodation programme capital bid. This will increase vacancies for rough sleepers to move into the hotel as interim accommodation whilst awaiting purchase, and opening of up to 25 further Next Steps accommodation programme funded beds to be available as soon as possible before the 31st of March 2021. In the meantime, the Council is specifically supporting BCHA in maximising moving on of residents in Gabriel House and its Move On Moena Court in order to free up further spaces for people to move on from the Great Western Hotel. Work is also underway exploring opportunities to lease houses and multiple occupation properties through third-party investors and property agents in order to increase temporary accommodation capacity. The Council is also leading a review and overhaul of the supported housing pathway in order to recalibrate and concentrate the availability of housing related support in some of the services and ensure clearer processes and targets around move on and throughout the system. This is being done through a number of measures. One, reviewing of rents in key accommodation. Two, reviewing the priorities of floating support service, and that's commissioned by county to upstream their work. Three, revised move on panel and pathway, including social housing referrals. Four, increasing financial incentives and support to private landlords. There remains a key issue regarding the loss of emergency overnight bed spaces as a result of COVID impact, with the continuing restrictions permitting no shared bed spaces capacity for us sleepers. Bed space numbers are still severely reduced. The Junction Night Shelter is currently accommodating a maximum of 6 people, 20 beds down on its 26 capacity. A works assessment to build in private rooms on the ground floor has to date proved cost prohibitive. Gabriel House is 7 beds down due to single occupancy of the bunks and no night chair facility, and 2 further spaces are suspended at Esther Community. The Young Persons Night Stop scheme has also been in abeyance since March, as have other hosted beds through countrywide provider Young Devon. This issue has been raised with Public Health and the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, and the Council is awaiting guidance documents understood to be a set of principles for reinstating some bed spaces with increased risk management measures where possible. It is also understood that there may be an opportunity for local housing authorities to apply to the HCLG for emergency winter funds to support added capacity for beds in areas of high unmet need. It is understood that the remaining 13 million of the 105 million Next Steps accommodation programme revenue fund has been reserved for such purposes. That's the end of my answer. And as you can see, it's very, very challenging during the COVID pandemic, trying to manage having rough sleepers and finding accommodation for them.
Thank you very much, Ruth. I will ask, first of all, Councillor Foggin whether she has a supplementary.
No.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Michael Mitchell?
No, I'd just like to thank the portfolio holder for that very full answer. Good.
Indeed.
I'd like to add, Chair, that again, we were discussing, because there is so much detail in this answer and it contains quite important information for councillors, that we are again going to provide a summary of this with some important information like contact telephone numbers for us if we see rough sleepers, and it's who do you contact if you also see antisocial behaviour happening, and whether there is any illegal activity. So it can be quite challenging sort of navigating your way through that. So I think since councillors tend to be the people that are contacted by the public, we need to have this information at our fingertips. So the plan is just to make it a little bit easier for us to have it there and know exactly what to do and where we go.
Thank you. I think that would be extremely helpful. Yes, absolutely. These are very, very important issues, clearly. So thank you. Happy to take any further points of clarification from members. Councillor Henson.
Can I, could I ask the portfolio, Councillor Williams, that I hear what you are saying, and we have excellent some night accommodation, and it really is, and it's necessary, but we can't force everybody into, because they just won't want to go into accommodation. That's always been that as long as I've been a councillor. But can I ask one thing that is, I'm getting repeatedly asked, rough sleepers in front of the Guildhall. This is not a good advert for Exeter alone, and I know somebody will scream that, you know, it be on the street, but that is not the point. The point is we have accommodation for people, and if they don't want to use that and they don't wish to think, it seems to be the same people that are returning. And now that Guildhall front door was put in the time when I was a young councillor for the IRA, and that is bomb-proofed and whatever. And I think that would be, it isn't, we must move that on, people moved on in that area, because I'm, what do I say to somebody? You know, I think it could be two departments here. It might not be only yours side of it, it could be the police side as well. But I think it's in our remit and in your hands, that possibly, if you insist. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm not sure whether there's a point of clarification specifically there, but Ruth, happy to come back to you. If you
I just want to, Councillor Henson, yes, I hear what you say. In fact, this was discussed at yesterday's Exeter Community Safety Partnership, which is chaired by the local commander. It's very much on the radar. It's not just the Guildhall. We are aware of Sidwell Street one. There's also St Thomas. So it is very much, and we're all working very hard to resolve it. So I think one of the issues is sometimes there's a perception we're not aware of it, nothing's being done, and I think there's an issue of communication there. So we're on the case and working very hard. So thank you for reminding us and drawing it to my attention. But yes, it's on my radar. Thank you.
Councillor Foggin.
What Yolanda just said, and do we not have a duty of care to our staff that work in the Guildhall? I mean, I know sometimes, you know, people do urinate outside and that sort of thing, and I think a duty of care is what we have for our staff.
I think we'll take that as a comment. I'm sure that's right. Thank you, Owen. Any further points of clarification from members of the committee? Okay, thank you. We will move on. These answers are necessarily long, so we'll move on to the next question, which comes from Councillor Michael Mitchell. Over to you, Michael.
Could the portfolio holder provide more detail regarding the use of the allocated government grant of £440,000 from the Next Step accommodation programme, and elaborate on the availability of other temporary placements?
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. I'm going to read out some numbers now, so I hope you've got a pen handy. The it was actually £440,779 that we received, and it's broken down as follows: £315,420 for accommodation costs at the Great Western Hotel, £49,980 for security at the Great Western, £13,325 for cleaning, and that includes needle sweeps and repairs, again at the Great Western, £38,000, that's the support which paid for 2 workers at 6 months, £15,362 on food and clothing support, and £8,712 on laundry support. Other temporary placements are outlined in the response I gave previously in questions from Councillor on question 2A and 2B. The Council's 130 units of procured temporary accommodation, that's 95 units plus a further 35 move-on units, are consistently full, with voids being relet within 24 to 48 hours. In addition to the 33 rooms at the Great Western Hotel, the Council is currently has a further 15 persons in spot purchase hotel accommodation, and that was as of the 6th of October.
Thank you very much. Michael, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you for that clarification. So my understanding from what you're saying is that this is in effect a retrospective payment for services that we have already provided. If that is so, is the funding in place to take this through until the end of the financial year?
I think I'm going to have to pass you on to Bindu to answer that.
Thank you, Chair. So it's not retrospective funding as such. So when the government required us to bring everyone in and we moved to do that, there was a certain amount of funding that was allocated to that. We, in fact, spent more than that, and that was met through, with agreement with the portfolio holder, that was meant through in-year savings within the service. So that covered that. So the funding that we've received now will allow us to maintain that provision, as you say, until the end of the financial year. But it's not retrospective as such, but we hope it will go some way towards plugging the gap in terms of funds the council has had to spend. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Happy to take any points of clarification on this question. Councillor Henson.
Yes. Quite frankly, when you look at these figures, one begins to wonder. Certainly, it's not going to get warmer on the future years coming. Have we thought of leasing a 5-year hotel, a small or a medium-sized hotel, over a period of years? Because if we're spending that amount of money, it's cheaper to lease over 5 years and at least pay, if it's 400 and some odd or 300 and some odd Ks, if you broaden that out, it's over £1 million, £1.5 million. A lease on a small hotel or a reasonable size hotel might be the answer.
Do you want to cover that? Yeah, Bindu.
Yeah. Well, I'll just answer initially and we'll pass on to Bindu. I think the issue is that you know, we have to bid for this money and we get it, and it's sort of it's piecemeal, so it is very difficult to make any long-term plans. But in terms of, you know, we've got some bids in to actually buy and build some accommodation. So, you know, if we're successful there, it may address some of your comments there, Councillor Henson. But I'm going to pass over to Bindu now to put a bit more detail on that.
Thank you, Chair. If I've understood Councillor Henson's question, and I may have misheard Councillor Mrs. Henson, so apologies if I have, you made reference to winter provision in your question. So all I wanted to say is just clarity.
Sorry, Bindu. No, I meant you could take the year in advance. If we're talking about, you know, a whole year, when you lease the property, you would take it on for 3 to 5 years. Okay. I'm just looking at it a different way.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you. So the funding that we have been given, so the amount that the portfolio holder identified in the region of just under 441,000 has specifically been given by the government to local authorities to continue to work with those people who've been brought in as a result of everyone in. So specifically because of obviously the pandemic. And so that funding is specifically for that. You're absolutely right, of course. In an ideal world, we'd be given additional funding to be able to do some of that longer term planning. But, you know, we are where we are and we're trying to make the best use of the funding we have available. But having only been given 440 and knowing that it's not just the accommodation, it's really important we have the right support to the people who are in that accommodation. That is the best we can do at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further points of clarification? Okay. All right. Thank you. We'll move on to question 4. Back to you, Councillor Michael Mitchell.
Thank you. In the current crisis, many tenants in all sectors are experiencing financial hardship, not of their own making. What actions can the council take to ensure that if the number of eviction orders rise due to non-payment of private rentals, tenants and their families are able to remain in their homes to provide the social and other stability they need at this time?
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. I shall read out this answer as well. The Council's Homelessness Prevention Service is working alongside welfare and benefits staff to share case information internally across different departments. And so tenants approaching the service for housing advice, especially where rent arrears or risk of are involved. A homelessness prevention advice update is being drafted in order to circulate on social media and via the website to provide early advice and contact information for households at potential risk. Financial support utilising discretionary funds, for example, hardship, to provide rent contributions are already in place for some households. Housing advice staff also negotiate with payment plans with some private landlords, especially as more workable alternatives to the extended and more convoluted eviction process. Other measures regarding rent arrears and payment plans are in place with council tenants as there's a question on this next, I think. So you'll hear more then.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Okay.
Mitchell, do you have a supplementary?
Just thank for the answer. As I say, I think many of us are concerned about the private sector, where normally, if there are problems, they come through us through the homelessness channel. And the concern is with the numbers that might come through in the autumn. And I'm sure from our side of the bench, we're more than willing to support the portfolio holder if she wished to put a proposal forward that we lobbied central government to provide funding out of their coffers to help keep people in their homes, as I say, when the rent arrears, etc., are not their own fault at this time.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell, for that offer.
Might have been helpful too if the government hadn't ended the ban on evictions and had extended that, but there we go. Any further points of clarification from members of the committee to this question? Okay, all right, thank you very much indeed. We move on to questions from the non-committee members, and we'll start with a question from Councillor Jemima Moore. Now, Jemima's not able to be with us this evening, so I will ask her question. What levels of delays before receiving their first payment are new applicants for universal credit typically experiencing in Exeter? Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Our Department for Work and Pensions Partnership Manager has confirmed that they don't have any first payment delays, so that's really good news. All universal credit claims are processed and paid on time in the first month, unless they do not verify their information or contact Job Centre Plus to verify their claim. So around 97% are paid on time, so that's good news.
Thank you very much. Well, obviously, Councillor Jemima was not here for a supplementary, but I'm happy to take any points of clarification from members of the committee. Okay, no hands. Right, we'll move on to the question from Councillor Diana Moore. Over to you, Diana.
Thank you. So continuing the benefits and welfare theme, since April, how many new benefit and welfare claimants are there in Exeter, and how many are predicted to the end of the year? And does the council have the capacity to process the current and expected workload to ensure that there's no delayed claimants?
Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Diana Moore. There's some numbers here, and so I have got a table, and I thought rather than read it out and they were all scribbling like mad, I thought it'd be easier if we could have the tabulated information. Thank you very much to Howard for preparing this to make it a little bit easier. So I'll just talk you through this particular table, which shows caseload figures for housing benefit and council tax support. So looking at the council tax support column, which is on the middle, so it's the first column on the left, you'll see that we did have a spike with the pandemic, the peak of the pandemic, and it's now the trend is it is coming slowly down. So that's good news. In the housing benefit column, the caseload has been reducing at a fairly consistent rate since the introduction of universal credit and hasn't been hugely impacted by COVID-19. Some of the reduction in housing benefit will be due to existing claimants starting new jobs and claiming universal credit instead of working tax credit, not just customers losing their jobs and claiming universal credit instead of job seekers allowance. If this continues and the council tax support is expected to reduce by a further 200 by April 2021. However, realistically, there's likely to be a second wave of financial impact and job losses leading to an increase in claims. If this is half the size of the first wave, it would mean an additional 300 claims, but it's impossible to predict at this point. Officers anticipate being able to manage a second wave of claims as they did in the spring without undue impact on processing times. And if necessary, staff can be diverted from less urgent work, and delays in making decisions on the council tax support claims can be offset by flexibility on the recovery side. So I think that's some positive reassurance there.
Thank you. Councillor, do you have a supplementary?
No, thank you for that reply, and thank you to staff for being able to process that and keep on top of that, because obviously it's quite an anxious time for people, so thank you.
Absolutely. Happy to take any points of clarification from members of the committee. No hands going up. Okay, right, we'll move on to your question 3, Councillor Moore.
So we talked about it earlier a little bit. Will the council be implementing or give consideration to its own voluntary extended ban on evictions of council tenants who have fallen behind on rents due to the impact of the COVID pandemic? So I'm talking about that situation particularly.
Thank you, Councillor Moore, for giving me the opportunity to be able to reassure members. Whilst there are no plans to extend the eviction ban once it expires, members can be reassured that there are a number of checks and balances in place to ensure tenants are given every opportunity to resolve any debt issues with the council as its landlord. As is often the case, the officers have to determine who cannot pay and those that will not pay. Evictions are only ever an action of last resort for any breaches of tenancies, including non-payment of rent. As a landlord, we must always balance the need to support our tenants as much as is practical against those the need to generate the income to provide the services to all tenants. So I hope that reassures you, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Moore, do you have a supplementary?
So what action will officers take for those who cannot pay? I mean, what I'm talking about is about the impact of the COVID pandemic. I'm not talking about people who will not pay. I'm talking about people whose circumstances have significantly changed.
I'm going to ask Bindu to respond with a bit more detail, if that's okay.
Bindu.
Thank you, Chair. So officers will continue to work in the way that they did pre-pandemic, frankly, where we're really keen to give our customers generally, and particularly our tenants, what we would call a good listening to. And that means spending a lot of time understanding what are their particular circumstances and where we might be able to either offer advice ourselves or refer them to another advice agency. It will include things like going through income and expenditure with them, talking to them about how they might prioritise their debts, because what is, of course, likely is that the council will not be the only organisation that the individual might owe money to. But sometimes people tend to think that, if you like, the voices that shout the loudest in terms of people that you owe money to are the ones to pay. But in fact, there are certain debts that you have to repay, and of course rent would be one of them because it keeps the roof above your head. So we will help to, where we can, refer them to, for example, utility companies, so that they can fully understand the various means of support that are available to them. Ultimately though, our expectation is that they continue to work with us to repay, even if it's very small amounts, because one of the things that we've learned is that at least if people are paying small amounts, it's about, if you like, the habit of kind of keeping that on track, so you don't let debts build up, because then at some point it becomes daunting. So we will continue to work with our tenants, as I said, in whatever way possible. But at the end of the day, as the portfolio holder has already identified, if we don't get rents in, that reduces the amount of funds we have available to maintain our properties and provide more social housing in the city. I hope that's helpful, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Bindu. It sounds like the council will use as much flexibility as it possibly can in all cases here, and I think it is. I think I'm right in saying it's very, very rare that council tenants are evicted. So I hope that's reassuring for you, Councillor Moore. Happy to open it up to other members of the committee for points of clarification. All clear on that? That's good. Thank you. Right. We'll move on to your question 4, Councillor Moore, please.
Thank you. What specialist support is the council providing for those who are rough sleeping, who have been evicted or abandoned emergency accommodation?
Thank you, Councillor Moore, for this question. It gives us an opportunity again to explain the approach that we're using at the moment. The council's policy towards rough sleepers recently evicted or abandoning emergency accommodation is one of continued contact and ongoing assessment of housing and health need. Outreach provide welfare checks and support for the individual to learn from the issues that led to the accommodation loss. Health needs are monitored by the clock tower surgery staff in the main, along outreach staff, and where relevant, an individual may also have a housing navigator worker advocating for them to access alternative services felt to be needed in order to support the issue underlying the eviction, e.g. mental health, substance treatment, social care, etc. It's worth noting that the are actually, they follow the client, so it's where there is a continuity and an opportunity to establish a relationship there. And we know that a number of rough sleepers, when we had the antisocial behaviour conference, of which only an element of the conference was on rough sleeping, because there are many, there's a whole range of antisocial behaviour. This is one of the things that the street attached people were saying is really, really helpful to them to have somebody, a continuity of support. So I think we're doing really well there. The council supports specialist support engagement on the streets by the Rough Sleepers Initiative funded interventions through a specialist drug and alcohol outreach worker, plus a nurse and GP outreach sessions. The council also led the Rough Sleepers Initiative bid for a mental health navigator to work with rough sleepers and housing needs. Is also engaged with a revision plan for the Devon Partnership Trust mental health community offer to complex and vulnerable individuals, including rough sleepers. Rough sleepers, including those recently evicted, are also being supported to access COVID testing where needed through combined planning and interventions between the usual services plus public health support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams, and top marks for not using acronyms throughout your answers this evening. Very important, that I think that people understand what we're talking about. Lots of acronyms used in the council, as we know. Councillor Moore, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Williams. When you were talking, it broke up and I didn't quite hear your answer. Can you just elaborate on the specialist support? Because many of these many people are facing very complex situations in their lives, and I wasn't quite clear if you're saying this had been the case or this is now the service around drugs and alcohol and mental health provision. So I'm sorry, it's because the line broke up. Can you clarify that again?
I said that the council supports specialist support engagement on the street via the Rough Sleepers Initiative funded interventions through a specialist drug and alcohol outreach worker, plus a nurse and GP outreach sessions, and that they're from the clock tower practice. Is that the part that you missed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Happy to take any points of clarification. Councillor Henson.
Thank you, Chairman. I apologise for the cat. It will keep continuous attention. I would. The last two questions, and was very well answered by Dindu and Councillor Williams. Nothing has changed over the years. A lot of it is, some of it is family background, and it's so reassuring that Exeter has been the forerunner of this, and I do congratulate the council on this. And it is a very complex in different departments because it's different things. But a lot of it is, a lot of people are too embarrassed to ask for help until it is too late. And then when it's too late, this is when we have to come in. But it's an ongoing thing. Time has never changed over the years that I have been on the council, and I was environmental health years ago. And it's an ongoing thing, and it's so reassuring to hear Bindu talking about what we're doing, and well done.
Councillor Henson, I'm going to take this opportunity to actually, because I've had to learn a lot in the last week, and I have to say there's so much I didn't know, and I want all councillors to know this. But for example, the bit I mentioned about the housing navigator worker, this is an initiative. It's not just the City Council that's funding this, but there are other partners as well. But this was initiated by Exeter City Council staff, Richard Crompton, and also their setting up of CoLab. So we are doing a fantastic job in leading the way. It's a really, really tough nut to crack. And I think that what we all have to recognise is we're going to have probably more failures than successes, but each success is really, really important. And we just got to keep going and just hope that we actually make progress in this really challenging area of support. So thank you for your comments, Councillor Mrs. Henson. Thank
you very much. Any further points of clarification? Okay, I will take this opportunity to ask one of my own then, if I may. And it relates to a couple of figures in the report and to this question. Do you know how many of the 22 people who have lost or abandoned emergency accommodation fall within the 28 people identified as currently rough sleeping?
I'm afraid I can't answer that, so I'm going to pass that to Bindu.
Bindu.
I'm not able to answer that exactly, Chair, but what I would say is that I would expect that so when someone abandons accommodation or is asked to leave the accommodation, we will try, as has already been explained by the portfolio holder, to find other solutions for them. So it may very well be that a location like the Great Western Hotel isn't appropriate for whatever the reason might be. And so we will, of course, work as hard as we can to find alternative types of accommodation, but ultimately sometimes that doesn't work. And so I would imagine that if people have left the accommodation we've provided, either their own behaviour or their needs are such that they cannot be accommodated in that way, so they're likely to be represented in the numbers that we see of people who are sleeping on the streets. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I think unfair of me to expect an exact figure. It wasn't what I was getting at, so that's helpful to give an indication.
It might be helpful just to also add, for example, to rough sleepers just this week that we have been able to get support for. They weren't from Exeter, and we've got one that's been able to return to their accommodation in another county, and we have another one now being supported by a different district council. So we are working really hard, and clearly there are reasons why people leave their accommodation but and come to Exeter, but we try and resolve it, and we've had 2 successes this week, so that's good news.
Good news. Thank you very much indeed. That, I think, brings us to the end of the questions to Councillor Williams. So we would, I'm happy to take any brief discussion on the topics we've heard. I've kind of allowed questions of points of clarification to be a little bit broader, so we have sort of had that discussion already. But if there are any further sort of pressing points while we still have Ruth with us, then please indicate now. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next section. Seeing any hands up, so that's fine. Okay, well, we'll thank you very much, Ruth, for your time and for addressing members' questions, and to Bindu. I think Bindu's staying with us, but I'm not sure whether you are. Ruth, welcome to, of course. Please do also pass on our thanks, as always, particularly at the moment, from members of this committee to all of the staff in your combined areas of responsibility. They're doing a fantastic job under very, very heavy pressure, so thank you. May I now ask Councillor Laura Wright, as portfolio holder for Council Housing Development and Services, to briefly present the note relevant to her portfolio, which members will have had the opportunity to read. Welcome, Laura, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. Firstly, could I just also welcome Councillor Williams to her new portfolio, and I think everyone can see already what a valuable asset to the Executive Committee she already has proven herself to be, and know will be in the future. So thank you very much. That was very interesting to hear all the detail from your report, Ruth. So yes, I am going with the Chair's assumption that everybody has read the report from the housing team, and we'll move to questions very quickly. But just also want to thank, sorry, because it starts sounding like an award show, but I do really need to and want to thank our housing director, Bintu Arjun, our housing leads, the officers, and all of the members of staff for their outstanding commitment to our tenants during the ongoing COVID situation. And we've had some really nice feedback from individual tenants to say how well they were looked after, and the communications were really good, and some particular members of staff really going over and above to do this and to help tenants and make sure that the tenants were okay and looked after. So a huge thank you to all of the staff in the housing team for this. I think you can see from the report, it sort of details, it gives a picture of when we first went into lockdown, that emergency and essential repairs, and also regulatory work that had to carry on did possible within the restrictions of the COVID. Now we've gone through a period of opening up a little bit. They've worked very hard on dealing with the backlog of non-essential repairs and things that needed to be done. I think also during lockdown, as everybody was quite rightly dealing with their own immediate situation, we found that we didn't get so many reports to the housing team for non-essential repairs. But again, people have now started a little bit getting back to normal. So there's been quite a lot that have come through, but everything's been dealt with really fast, actually faster than it expected, to catch up with all of that. So that's it, Chair. If you like, I'm happy to move to questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, we've got some questions from members of the committee. First of all, Councillor Michael Mitchell, your question 1, please. Michael.
Can the portfolio holder, in the light of the concerns within the private sector regarding the implications of EWS1 certification for the safety of tenants and homeowners, state whether local authority housing in Exeter has or will be inspected to the same standard as that required by the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors?
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. So again, I've got a very long answer for you. So you have to be careful what you wish for. So I hope you're going to take down every word, because it is such an important issue, fire safety. Then obviously we need to get it right, and we are getting it right. So I'll read you this very detailed answer. So the government recognised that following Grenfell and subsequent MHCLG, which is Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Governance, Chair, guidance to landlords, it became more challenging for people to be able to obtain mortgages for high-rise residential properties, and that's very much in the news at the moment, particularly in London. It therefore supported industry efforts to apply consistency in how such properties are valued. And the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors developed a procedure designed to secure a proportionate valuation judgment to buildings that are over 18 metres or lower if there were specific concerns, for instance, cladding systems containing combustible materials without fire stopping, wooden balconies, etc. So in short, A, is the building over 18 metres, or B, if it's less than that, would the exterior construction allow fire to spread? So the form, which is the EWS1 form, is used by a surveyor making an assessment to record their findings. So it has to be remembered that the EWS1 is not a fire risk assessment as such, but provides information to the valuer or the lender when deciding whether to provide a mortgage. It's not a legal requirement, although of course we take great note of all ministry guidance, have risk assessed all of our blocks of flats, and are planning detailed compartmentalization, that will do assessments for all our blocks of flats over the next 4 to 5 years. And obviously we all know what that means. It's a way of stopping fire spreading. And you will see that there was information about that in the report. So I'm sorry that I can't quite say that word, but I hope you know what I'm talking about. The form itself says this form is intended for recording in a consistent manner what assessment has been carried out for the external wall construction of residential apartment buildings where the highest floor is 18 metres or more above ground, or where specific concerns exist. It should not be used for any other purposes. The Guardian newspaper wrote an article about this last month. They identified a capacity issue. There are only 300 or so experts certified to carry out these particular inspections, and they have been prioritising taller buildings, as you would expect, and those where there is known to be cladding. And for information, none of our blocks here in Exeter have cladding. Further, they found that it would take until 2026 to complete EWS1s just on the 18-metre plus high-rise blocks and those with cladding. The article also quoted the MHCLG as saying, we do not support a blanket approach to EWS1 forms on buildings, and where owners are able to demonstrate their buildings are safe using other equivalent evidence. We would encourage lenders to accept that. we are investigating further actions we can take to support the industry, including looking at ways to address capacity issues, unquote. So that background information has been provided to sort of help explain our status with regard to our own stock. So in our own stock, we have only one block, which is above 18 metres, which is Wren's house in Whipton. It doesn't have cladding and there are no external features which would facilitate fire spread. All our other blocks are less than 18 metres and none of them have cladding or features which would facilitate fire spread. We do have some blocks with vertical tiles which are held on by wooden battens, and these are very common. However, fire spread would be slow, easily reached by the fire service and quick to extinguish. Our clear and safe policy ensures that communal areas are free from combustible materials as much as possible. And we do ask our residents to remove combustibles from shared balcony areas, for instance, barbecues. Our own fire risk assessments now also look at surface features. We make our fire risk assessments available to our leaseholders and third parties as well on request. We will be carrying out, there's that word again, sorry, compartmentation checks of all blocks and have already begun to involve procurement and identify frameworks, etc. And again, there's information about that in the report that's been presented. One specification that is that they make a recommendation if they believe an EWS1 would be beneficial. So in that case, that would be a sort of a double check for us to do. So in summary, there are no specific concerns currently that warrant the instigation of an EWS1 form by us, the freeholder. We are nevertheless expecting a continuation of demands for EWS1s. If the lender accepts our stance that none are needed, then normally we would hear no more. Alternatively, if the lender will not accept our position, then the leaseholder is free to engage a suitably qualified consultant to carry out an EWS1 survey, and we will take note of its findings, but it is not the same as a formal fire risk assessment undertaken by ourselves and for our purposes. And again, to reiterate, its sole purpose really is to assist evaluation in order to attract funding for sale. A South West Housing Association has adopted a similar approach and attempted to engage with the Royal Institute for Chartered Surveyors, but their request has been ignored. So I hope that that gives you a full answer.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mitchell, did you have a supplementary?
Well, thank you for that. As I said, because I think this is an issue all local authorities are going to be facing. I was particularly thinking of the right to buy scheme, that where people living in blocks or in high-rise, but not necessarily next elsewhere, want to buy the property, they're going to hit this brick wall straight away of the EW form. And we as owners are the only people who can authorise the inspection to take place. The tenant or the leaseholder hasn't got that authority. So that's partly why I asked the question, because I'd be interested to know what the generic local authority response is to this as a problem, because it is going to be an ongoing problem.
Is there a question, Michael, or is that just a comment?
I'll say a comment.
That's fine. Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any points of clarification, please? We'll take those now. Seeing any raised hands? Okay, well, that's a very thorough answer again. Thank you very much to Laura. We come on now to questions from non-committee members and to a question from Councillor Diana Moore. Diana.
Thank you. Well, this is the same question I asked earlier. We did have a good full answer. But Councillor Wright, after the national ban on eviction ends at the end of this month, will the council be implementing or give consideration to its own voluntary extended ban on evictions of council tenants who have fallen behind on rents due to the impact of the COVID pandemic? And will you be monitoring, the levels of rent arrears? Just a little bonus element in there because we discussed it earlier. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this question's appeared twice because it wasn't clear initially to us which portfolio holder it fell to. You're welcome to comment, Sir Laura, if you would like, but we don't want to.
I'll add a quick comment, Chair, if that's okay. Thank you. Because yes, I think Councillor Williams gave it a very extensive answer to Councillor Moore, which I hope will alleviate her concerns and answer her questions about this. But I just would like to reiterate as well, when Councillor Moore asked this question back at the beginning of lockdown, almost exactly the same question, but of course now we've moved on, so it's still relevant for her to ask it again. But my answer would be the same, which as you've heard from Councillor William, we would go through every single scenario that we could to help somebody that was falling behind with rent, couldn't pay rent, to be able to get them into a situation where if it's because of a sudden loss of income, they are then able to seek the right support, benefits, financial help. So it really is a very, very last resort thing for us to actually evict any of our own tenants. And it would be cutting our nose off to spite our face if those tenants then applied for emergency housing because they'd been made homeless by us. So there's very, very few occasions where this would happen. And I think I'd be safe to say that the occasions where it does happen where non-payment of rent is a conscious decision, perhaps, rather than a result of an actual life circumstance. So thank you for allowing me to add to that one, Chair.
My apologies, muted there, doesn't help. Bindu.
Thank you, Chair. I think I heard a question right at the end from Councillor Diana Moore about monitoring arrears, if I've understood it correctly. So just to reassure Councillor Diana Moore that we do very closely monitor our monthly arrears figures because that allows us obviously to check trends over time. So with all our collection Chair.
Thank you very much, that's helpful. I think we've covered this question, so I'm not going to give you a supplementary on this occasion, Diane, I'm sorry about that, but we will move on to your next question, though, your question 2,
could
please.
I ask, sorry, Chair.
Apologies, I haven't opened it up. You're right. Yes, Councillor Henson. Well, we have already dealt with this question, but I'll take your clarification only, please.
At what point, I believe we've been locked down for not pursuing people in the courts. At what point are we pursuing? Are we continue to pursue at the moment that I know it goes through a tremendous thing, and I'm not talking about that, but I believe the government said we can't pursue for a period of time. Is that lifted now or not? I think that's more to Bindu rather than...
Yes, the ban on evictions continues, Councillor Henson, until the end of this month.
Thank you. That's all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Bindu.
Clarification all round. Okay, we will now move on because we did cover this question earlier, so I've allowed a little bit extra time there. Councillor Moore, your second question, please.
Thank you. How will meaningful tenant participation be enabled as part of the recovery process? And how can the council support the formation and operation of tenants' associations?
Thank you, Diana. It's a really good question, and I'm thrilled because I've got a really good answer for you as well, which I hope you'll be pleased with. Again, it's quite detailed, so bear with me. I'm going to read it so that I don't miss out any important information. So we're very keen to improve our resident involvement service and to meaningfully involve residents in our work if they want to be involved. After much discussion with residents, we've reviewed and rewritten our resident involvement strategy, which is at the moment out for consultation. So you may have seen that on the website or perhaps on social media. So we would encourage anybody who's got an interest in this area to comment on the new strategy, which they can via a link on our council website or on our Facebook page. Full details of our plans are recorded in the strategy itself. So if you'd like to read in further detail, please go to the website and find it and comment. Once the consultation period is finished on the 21st of October and the strategy has been approved by executive, hopefully, we'll be able to start on our action plan. And this would include a new resident involvement structure that allows residents to choose how they want to get involved and to what extent. I think that is the really important point as well. To not impose upon the residents a structure that we think would be meaningful for them to engage with. To actually ask people, do you want to engage more and how do you want to do it, has really led this whole consultation. 2, regular resident events such as fetes, open days and gardening projects, etc. That's been going on in the last year. I was really pleased to attend some of those events, and they're very useful, very good fun, and very good for bringing social housing tenants together. So that's going to carry on, and more so. Some new thriving local residents groups that have formed. Some of them have sprung up because of the COVID situation. So we really want to further sort of nurture and support those groups. Residents undertaking their own projects to improve services and their local environment. Regular tenant training to increase capacity. Improve two-way communication, especially via internet, smartphone and social media, which is a big thing we've been working on this past year. And involvement from all parts of the community, particularly those who've been underrepresented in the past, to include a truly diverse group of involved residents. Specifically on the subject of forming residents' associations, we are going to find out what appetite there is for such groups amongst residents. Again, not make the assumption that the way residents' associations have always existed is the way that people still want them to exist. So to find out how people would like them to be. Set up initial meetings with any interested and involved residents to discuss the aims and objectives of any such association. Help to establish a constitution together with a code of conduct. Help to decide on number and regularity of meetings, and help to elect key officers. Help with booking rooms or providing refreshments, paying reasonable expenses, providing stationery and such like, and giving help and advice on running such meetings, which may at the moment include tuitions on Zoom, I should think, rather than providing paper copy things to keep up with where we are at the moment. So the key to all of this, of course, is to work with our residents and help them to achieve what they feel they want to achieve. So to add to that a little bit, we've also set up the Council Housing Advisory Board, which you would have, we came to you and to executive about that, and that will be going to full council, executive and full council again, to sort of rubber stamp that. Councillor Diana Moore, I'm very pleased to say you will be one of the members on that board, along with Councillor Wardle, myself and Councillors Hannaford and Packham. So Councillor Moore, you're going to find out much more about how we're doing this, because that would be part of the advisory board as well, to really support this improvement of how we work for and with our residents and get our residents engaged and involved. And actually on the Council Housing Advisory Board, there will be 2 residents, I believe. Once all the local associations have been established, they will be electing a chair and a vice chair overall to represent tenants and leaseholders, and they will also sit on the boards with us, Diana. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy being involved in that as well. I'll just mute while my phone goes off and ask if there's a supplementary, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wright. Yes, do you have a supplementary, Councillor Moore?
Thank you very much, Councillor Wright. Yes, I'm very keen on supporting tenants' activities and setting up tenants' associations, and I do recognise as well, and I think it's important, the role that they played during the lockdown in terms of supporting neighbours and liaising with the council. I do know other residents felt isolated, and so I think that local associations are important. And I'm wondering about what the council can do to help increase those connections, which maybe will follow as you've described. But is there something else the council can do in terms of reducing isolation? For example, promoting the home call service as part of the stock condition work to actually enable people to or promoting the tenants association as part of other streams of work to make sure that as many residents as possible have the opportunity to engage with what's going on.
Yes, that's a good point. And yes, I agree with you, the point that you've made about residents associations, as I said, that have sort of sprung up because of the COVID situation. So not necessarily council tenant associations. These were very much neighbourhoods, groups in the majority, although I do believe, Diana, you were working with one down in on the Key area as part of your wards that was a council housing tenant association group that sprung up. So yes, hearing from tenants as to how they can best operate and how they want to operate and for what reason is exactly what this consultation is about, rather than us making the assumption. It's a really good point that you've made there about including sort of promoting again information about the home call system as well on various other places. So I will take note of that. That's a good point. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Foggin, but I'll perhaps bring Bindu in first, if I may. Councillor Foggin, I'll come back to you in a second. Bindu.
Just briefly, Chair, and just to carry on a bit from what the portfolio holder has just shared with the committee. So we obviously have the Tenants Magazine Insight, which goes out to tenants, and in that we make sure that wherever we can, we promote the other services, both provided within the council and outside of the council, that might support our tenants. And so, for example, when we're trying to encourage our tenants to participate in the consultation on the on the resident involvement strategy, we again, as Councillor Diana Moore had suggested, we've used our housing officers who might be seeing them for routine inquiries to remind them to put their thoughts into what our plans might look like. Similarly, when our repair staff are in contact with tenants, we ask them to do the same. And we've even asked our customer service officers, when they're taking telephone calls and the person identifies themselves as a tenant of ours, we would encourage them again to go on and complete the survey. So absolutely right, we try and use whatever we can to try and pass that information on to our tenants. But as Councillor Wright said, we need to continue to do more. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Foggin.
Yeah. Can we at some stage know how many council houses we got and where they're sort of focused on what patches they are? Because I know we haven't got the amount of council houses we had when I first come into the city council. And the other thing I'd like to tell you is your home call. I don't know if you're aware of it, but my sister was in my sister was in hospital back along, and she was actually advised to go through Exeter City Council because they were the best. And I thought, I'm just going to blow our trumpet for a minute. I just think it's important to do that when we're doing something good.
Thank you. Laura.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Owen, Councillor Foggin. Your question about how many council properties we have, I'm sure Bindu will come in and correct me now. So I'm going to try and show off, but I'll get it wrong. Just short of 5,000. I think it's 4,976. Bindu, would you like to correct me?
Near enough.
Is that near enough?
Yeah, I wouldn't dream of correcting you, Councillor Wright, but as it so happens, that is accurate.
I know you're busy, but is there at some stage we can have a breakdown of where they are?
Absolutely, no problem.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further points of clarification from members? Okay, lovely. Thank you. Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the questions to Councillor Wright. Given we've through those, I'm happy to open the floor to any discussion on the points we've had. I'm not expecting anyone to want to say a lot, but this is your opportunity if you do want to raise any points that are connected to what we've been discussing. Nobody's jumping in. That's fine. Councillor Henson, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask Laura if what voids we have now, and we're talking about voids that have been, the word mothballs do, you know, you hear from ships being mothballed, but houses being mothballed is another thing. Have we, I hope we haven't got too many mothballed, because our priority side should be, we should keep these going. Did I see 5 weeks to redo these, and are we on schedule to keep these going?
Okay, sorry, Chair, is that okay?
Please do. No,
thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Yolanda. So in the report, there is a section about the void. So there's some figures in there for you. At the moment, we do have 23 major voids currently that are being looked at in order to fast track completion. So part of the reason that there's a backlog of the voids, one is obviously when we went into lockdown, people weren't able to move anyway. A lot of staff were furloughed, so a lot of staff from Mears, who are our contractor, were furloughed. Also, to clear a void, you generally speaking would normally have to take furniture and rubbish down to the tip, and the tips were closed as well. So there was nowhere to clear things from the void property too. And there was also a legal restriction on people being able to move in order to move into the voids anyway. So with some of the voids at that time, was a very good way of actually using them. They were used to partly go towards the everyone in policy to get everybody off the streets. So some of the voids were used to house homeless people. Now things have got moving again in all sorts of areas. We've obviously, as I say, we do have the backlog, and it will take 2 to 3 months to catch up on it. Although, having said that, the timescale that the officers were giving themselves to catch up on the backlog with other things, they're actually doing it. Everyone's working really hard and actually getting towards those targets a lot quicker. So it may not take as long as 2 to 3 months. And yes, the figure that you picked out was there's approximately 5 every week that are added to the list. So some of those will be because of people moving from one property to another within the city and the social affordable housing. So they may be moving to a bigger property, for instance. So that property will then become void sometimes if it needs work done to it. It's better to do new kitchens, bathrooms, essential maintenance, etc., while a property is empty. So sometimes you can't move somebody straight in, obviously. So that's where your 5 week approximately are coming. And again, it's a backlog because people weren't able to move for a good 3 months during the lockdown. And then that slowly started picking up again. So we are trying to catch up on everything at the moment. I hope that's answered your question. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are no other points or questions, then we will thank both Laura and Bindu very much indeed for their time and for addressing members' questions. Again, please do pass on the thanks of this committee to all of the staff in your combined areas of responsibility. The tremendous job they're doing. It is really, really appreciated. That just leaves us with the date of the next meeting, which you'll want to note is Thursday, the 3rd of December. Yes, we're there already. And that brings us to the end of this evening's meeting. And I'll be going on to another one shortly. So thank you to you all for attending. I will be bringing this meeting to a close at this point. Please keep safe, and I'll see you next time. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Chair.